Welcome back to moving. Oh, welcome back to Move the Bowl, Please podcast hosted by me, your host Sandra. Welcome to episode 2. We made it. We are not a one pump chump. I am in my room. It is definitely midnight. I am definitely sober. No, I've had coffee. I've had coffee. I still have coffee. I like pain. I like not going to sleep. I like constantly being aware for some reason. Coffee really gets me there. It's got a lot of oat milk in there. It's got a lot of other things in there. Because I need help. People who just do coffee raw, different breed. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about coffee. I'm not here to talk about what other people do. I'm here because I would like to get on the topic of loneliness. Yes, loneliness has been reported to be on the rise, especially since the pandemic. It's actually acutely turned the volume up for that problem, but it's always been a problem. And I kind of wanted to approach this specifically in a different way. So I want to start with myself, right? It's always best to start there. So I've been living in my cute apartment, my really sweet apartment, for about a year and a couple months, a year and like almost 6 months now. I have one roommate. She's lovely. And I have, for the most part, had a very good time. Fortunately, the walls are a little thin. Learned that the hard way. But other than that, the neighborhood is great. And I usually use my apartment as it stands, for the most part, it's kind of like a HP recovery center. I thought that I would spend so much more time, being present and aware in my apartment, but, the world demands labor and my energy. So going out, I moved here also while I was still a student. So school, work, the biz, I was doing a lot so I can come home to do nothing. And that was mainly the main purpose of my apartment. But then I graduated, and then it was the summertime, and I chilled out, and I really just soaked in being in my apartment. And we have a really nice kitchen, a nice living room. It's breezy in here. And when I was home this past Christmas, or Saturnalia, if you're a pagan, I remembered why I needed my apartment the way that it is, and the way that I use it now, mainly because I have anxiety. I also get overstimulated, and in ways of the overstimulation being like unavoidable. If I can avoid any kind of intensity, I find it much easier for me to find peace and to find my little groove to start doing whatever I need to do, versus being amongst other people, other moving parts, and having to, navigate through that. And I saw this clip from this podcast, and I'll credit them. I think the clip was from this podcast called Level Asian, and it was episode 23. And the girl said that for the most part, immigrant children pay rent in their mental health when they live at home. If that isn't a bar, I don't know what a bar is, because she did her big one with that one. And I know for all the other immigrant kids who are listening or watching this, let out a breath of like relief, because that is exactly what it feels like to be in the place that you grew up with a parent who is not from the country that you're in. And I think that's a lot of it's a lot of moving parts in that specific sentiment, right? It's like, of course, our parents, they love us so much. They don't know what to do with their love sometimes. They want us to succeed. They want their children to be well, and they're very, very caring. And at the same time, it can be overbearing. It can be exhaustive. It can be overstimulating. And I, for a fact, very much felt that. And it's also that infantilization, right? It's constantly being reminded you're their kid, you're their subject, you must listen to them. There is no dissension, and dissension can look like anything, right? And as I was growing up more and more while I was still living at home, the decisions that I wanted to make as an adult really started to cause some pots to be stirred, if I was to, give it any kind of label. And, other things like going out and drinking responsibly and, wanting to travel, all of these things started to become really, really hard to negotiate. And so moving out was the answer to all of those problems. I could do whenever I wanted, however I wanted, on my own terms, because I took care of myself. And part of that is, also trying to find yourself as a person. I think as children of immigrants, it's really hard to find your own voice. And I found myself when I moved out. I found out a lot about myself. A lot was revealed to me. And I don't think I would have been able to really get to that point if I was still living at home. And you know what? If I gotta pay rent to do all of that, I'm gonna do it. But I hate paying rent, y'all. I hate that shit so much. It's messed up for real. All of that preamble to say, I think the one thing that I've really started to kind of realize is that throughout this process of learning about myself, the summer that I spent right after being done school and spreading my wings and meeting new people and continuing to do what I do, I learned 3 things about loneliness. The first thing is that I had very much been under the expectation of behaving like the first girl of my family. I never was good at following rules. So sorry. If you tell me to do something, I might just not do it. And that was something that I thought that I had dodged because I was the second born. They'll find you. Don't worry, they'll find you. You're the first girl, they will find you. And at that time, when I finally left, it became really, like, I was like, wow. I was so, like, trying to, like, be in my own little mind about it, but no. There were many things that was expected of me, and I continuously dodged that, and that also caused unrest. My parent is very traditional, and the people that I grew up around just also had that expectation, and because I didn't reflect that, I think that also continued with my feelings of, like, discord. I couldn't really fulfill that role because it didn't speak to me, and it's hard to be in a place where the way that you are is not the norm, or it's not tolerated in that way, right? Or it's not celebrated even. Toleration is like the barest of bare minimums, but to be celebrated for who you are, I didn't really always feel that. And so now living on my own, I realize that, and I'm celebrating myself now. It's a process. You got to do it because who else is going to do it? The second thing that I realized is that I had mastered silencing or repressing myself. I had mastered not giving myself the right to be. I thought that I always had to make sure that I wasn't making too much noise, and I try not to be too noisy because the walls are thin here. But I thought that I had to really contain myself in order to be, you know, not a burden. And I did that a lot, not only where I lived, but like around other people. And so for a long time, I had shrunk myself. I kind of compressed myself a lot. And it was also like, in a means to save energy. I felt as though when I was younger, I would try to like, I'll try to make people my friends. I would try to appease people, and that just wasn't really working. And so I realized that too. I was like, wow, I'm really good at just making myself small. And that's so sad. So that was another thing that I realized as well. And that religious trauma, that little religious trauma, ooh, yeah, that's a little sugar on top. That's a little cinnamon sugar on top. So that was another part of that I realized. And then the third thing was that I like being around people, but I don't like being around people like that. Like, I like being amongst human beings. I like being around the noise and the movement and the chattering and the laughter and the yelling. I like that, but I don't like to always be engaged in that, Even as I got older, when you go to those big family parties, I would usually just go downstairs where the kids are, because the kids are just screaming and yelling. And if you don't want to join in, they don't really want to force you, because they got their little friends and they're doing their own little thing, and you can do your own little thing, I felt more awkward being around other adults or older people, because I feel as though they probably just assumed that I was supposed to be either going in the kitchen and helping the women cook, or that I should, like, I don't know, humor them with whatever I'm doing and stuff. And I didn't care for that at all. And so, yeah, those three things really became, those are things that I started to really be like, oh, like, these are the things about myself that I didn't know, but now these things are being revealed to me. And I feel as though parts of those things kind of illustrate how I too have felt that feeling of loneliness, mainly because of not fitting the expectation, of making myself small out of fear, and also by, not really wanting to be at the center of many things. That can kind of be the breeding ground for concepts of loneliness and that conflation of having your time by yourself versus feeling isolated and pushed aside. And I think for many people who are getting into their adulthood, because, this trend of a lot of people admitting that they don't have friends, I feel like it's much easier to admit those things once you kind of exit childhood, once you exit teenagehood, if that makes sense. You are no longer in the spaces, or you're no longer expected to fully conform, right? Like the concept of conformity as a kid is so heavy, it's so real. But once you step into adulthood, now you have your own destiny in your own hands. And so it's much harder to feel that pressure unless you're in these spaces. But, I just moved out, I finished school, I'm working now, and I'm in my apartment, and I'm by myself for the most part. And I started to also sympathize with the feelings of FOMO and the feelings of I'm not around people anymore. I'm not going with my friends to places as much as I used to. And that can be demoralizing. And friendships break apart, friendships crumble. They don't always last. And a lot of people have been pointing that out. And I don't know, I feel as though a lot of us are getting to a point where we're like, wow, like, this is kind of sad. Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, many of us have been acutely aware of how lonely we feel. And that's, part and parcel through social media and through how COVID affected the entire globe. The economy is such a big factor in that too. And I think the steady incline, like the studies have been showing that it's been happening since the late 90s. And that makes sense too. Most people have had also started to get personal computers or home computers. You remember that family computer that used to be in the open space? I feel like everyone had that. The computer where you had no privacy. But from the late 90s up until now, there's just been a steady incline of people having computers at home, and that can also make it less attractive to go and run outside and go and play tag with your friends or go and do these things in the forest. So as the technology has continued to become more and more accessible, this feeling of isolation obviously blossomed. And here we are now, where I think that the stat is like at least like over 60% of I think it's young men report to have no friends. And one stat that really shook me is that, like, I think it said like no, the stat was like uh 1 in 5 men have lost more friends. No, I don't know the stat, y'all. I'm gonna find it and I'll put it somewhere. But there was a stat showing that women had even less, or reported to have even less friends and than their male counterparts. And in the couple of videos that I watched talking about loneliness, I was so annoyed how they just skimmed over, like they were just like, oh yeah, the boys are sad, and I'm like, okay, what's new? What's new, girl? I don't. Okay, anyway, let me not get mean. But yeah, so it's slowly but surely been getting worse and worse, and especially for young people, right? And I think one key thing that has really changed, especially since the pandemic, is party culture. Party culture is not what we thought it was, and it is definitely not what it used to be. I remember seeing, videos and movies of people in college and thinking, oh my, or university, because it's America, right? And you're just like, oh my God, I'm going to be in these parties. And if I join a frat or if I join a sorority, it's going to be sick. I've only heard horror stories. Anyone who's been in a frat or a sorority, I'm afraid of y'all. But this concept and this fantasy of being a young hot person, you can drink now, you can go out and you're in school, and then you can wake up hungover with your friends and it's fine because you guys are together, you guys are a unit. Yeah, that's not how that happens. Like, I've been to a couple house parties and they were garbage. I would just end up being with the stoners anyway because I'm not really that huge of a drinker. I can hold my liquor, but I don't really want it to get lit like that in front of everyone in that way. And it's usually a word of mouth, so the way that you get to parties, no one's putting a post. Well, they are, but like no good parties are getting put on a poster in a freaking bulletin. It's like you get told by someone to join you. So the party culture that we used to have, and the the lack of, I will say, the lack of technology also helped people let loose a little more. Now if you let too loose, you might go viral. And no one wants to go viral, for real. So this party culture and this total this just removal of reality that movies portrayed made it so, at least for me, I anticipated a lot. I anticipated really interesting and fun adventures. It was minimal. It wasn't that interesting. And I found myself just having more interest in being around people that I, had things in common with. And for the most part, I'm not a big party animal. And most people that I like to hang around with, we just like to chat and vibe out, like we do things that are like, probably boring, but I like that sort of thing. And it doesn't mean that it's going to look the same as how it used to be, right? So, or how it used to be portrayed, like having a lot of friends and like having people jump in the car and like, y'all, that looked exhausting. That looked exhausting as hell, and I think that might also be an answer for this too, and the international community has only opened up, especially in countries like Canada. to a degree that's abusing too. They're getting abused, but also there's different kinds of factions that emerge out of that diversity. And so there was no way that the party culture, the homogenous vision that we have in our minds, there's no way that was actually going to happen in real life. And I think also part of that too is because so many people have different values and how they behave and how they live through life. They have different goals, right? Like in university, I went to school, I went to work, and I went home. You know what I mean? And those are the peak years for making those cohorts of friends and having those core people in your life. But if your priorities lie in getting good grades and going to work and coming home, which is for a lot of us, you know, in my generation, and even older too, but for a lot of immigrants, it's not going to translate into the concept that people have when they talk about their glory days. So all of these things, you know, they shape how we would, you know, see the friend economy as it is now. You're an immigrant kid, you're a Zoomer, and you live at home. What are you going to be doing? You're going online. You're going online. That's what you're goddamn going to do. You're going to go online. You're going to watch your favorite YouTuber. You're going to watch your favorite, anime, or you're going to binge another Netflix show. And that's how you're going to be spending your Friday nights. And you know, having that time to relax and recoup is so important. And so I would never really try and fully shit on that way of being, but at the same time it's not really conducive to making friends. And doing that rinse repeat, you know, having that rinse repeat kind of lifestyle doesn't make it so you feel like you want to go out of your comfort zone. And so many people who might say things like I don't have friends, or I can't say that I have a lot of friends, I would really also implore us to think about our habits and what we do and how we, you know, spend our time, right? I think a lot of people who have good friendships know that it takes work. And for a lot of us, we were just spoiled for a long time because of work and school and maybe clubs and things that interest us. It might have seemed like we had like a veil or maybe like a concept, a floating concept of people who we call our friends. But at the end of the day, being someone's friend is more than just people that you just end up around. It's putting intentional time to connect and relate and have someone, you know, cry on your shoulder and you do the same for them. It's a whole routine, not a routine, but a ritual. And it's something that you must put time to do intentionally. From the exhaustion of school and work and the pressures that you might have in your own life, it is hard to make good friends. Even the Bible says that a friend is something invaluable to have, but not all of us have the privilege to have that. And so if you do have that, hold on to your friends, girl. Hold on, because you never know what'll happen, you know? And a lot of people are suffering. I think the health stat or the health study that this one general guy, I forget his name, but he had announced back in like 2017 that having feelings of loneliness is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's a lot of cigs. That's like a professional cigarette smoker. And I'm not one of those. And I can only imagine how hard it is to quit too, right? I think that's another thing. It's that when you're in this space where you feel comfortable not interacting with people, not going out of your way, not taking the time to even potentially be rejected by those people, it's really hard to quit that comfortability. Comfortability. We got through it. We made it through it. Thank you, Jesus. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And so I am so like, I don't really see this problem as something that's fully surprising. Once you start to really think about it, it makes total sense. It makes complete logical sense, because a lot of the reasons why people feel these burdens is because of the total lack of third spaces, right? And this is something that many people have spoken about, but A lot of people aren't really finding, what's the word? They're not finding fulfillment in their work or school or other obligations because it's an obligation. Having to do something that isn't required of you, to volunteer to do something out of your own will always feel more fulfilling than having to do something that's compulsory. And I think people miss that. People miss being able to do something that rewards them back, right? That isn't something that's directly going to benefit them, because of that stress. You want to do things because it makes you feel good, not because it's time, or because it's on a schedule, right? And yeah, people are crying out. People want friends, and I can sympathize with that a lot too. Another thing that friends can also help with is also helping you take care of yourself. I'll be the first to admit it. I am not good at taking care of myself. I am not the kind of person who wants to just wake up and make breakfast and make my bed and get to work on time. I try to get to work on time, but it's hard. And I can only imagine how much harder it is if you don't have family, if you don't have anyone around you, not even friends, just people who would be concerned about your whereabouts and your wellness. Because taking care of yourself, especially when you're not in a good mental or economic space, it gets so tough, beyond words. It's just like being glued to your bed, and not even feeling the motivation to even get up and go and pee. Like, was it cut to Rue almost dying because she couldn't piss. It's really real, though. It's really real. And with how young people now are just being crushed by the unrealistic expectations of career and life goals, it's no wonder. It's no wonder that people feel so disillusioned and so isolated and by themselves. And, for those of us who have an affinity for substances, that can be used as a coping mechanism. And that costs money too. So it's like, you don't have money to do shit. You don't feel like you're whatever you're doing is working for you. You're not getting a livable wage. And you can't even afford a little good time. That's depression. That's messed up for real. At least back in the day, I feel like a beer or getting a good bottle of wine probably didn't cost you way much, but it's getting crazy out here. It's getting worse out here. So we've gone over how terrible the economy can be. And in extreme cases, something that can come up to mind is the rise, specifically in South Korea, of this phenomenon called lonely death. So there's this really thorough and great Korean documentary on YouTube that I watched recently, and basically it showed that there was a really sharp incline in people in their mid 30s to early 40s in South Korea just dying in their homes, and no one knowing that they've passed until it starts to smell. And it's so sad because these people, for a long time, they were either suffering from some kind of debt problems. A lot of them also were estranged from their families. Some of them have been just furiously trying to study. There was a clip of this one girl who was saying that she missed getting her teachers. I think they had to do an exam to get their teacher's permit, and she missed the threshold by 1%. And all of her friends were able to graduate and start working, and she had to do a whole other an extra year of just studying to try to get to where her friends were at. And she expressed how she just felt like really awkward about trying to talk to them because they were so busy with school and being teachers. And she said at one point she felt so depressed that she found herself writing a suicide note, like just kind of in a daze. And I mean, people are struggling, and this was like, I want to say this is like, this is post, pandemic, but like not too post, like I want to say at least 2022 latest. And so it's really, really tough, right? And in countries like Korea, we always think of it as a place, at least now, like when I was in my K-pop phase, I was like, oh my God, like Korea number one. But I've since, grown up and matured and been like, no, like every country has its problems. And a country like Korea, where it's like a paradoxical place where they have the communal understanding of culture, but they also have that individualism veneer on top of that was imported, and I want to say by their influence from America, from the United States. And now they're in a point in time in their economy where the things are not thinging as they used to be. There's certain industries that are just totally being decimated, and that means that many people who had spent their entire lives working within that industry just get totally fucked. And there was a story of one man who passed away because of his job as I think he was like people who do move cargo on ships. He used to be in that industry, and the industry started to shrink more and more, and they started laying off millions of people, and he unfortunately was one of those people. And so far, Korea has put out a policy to help people within the 30 to 40 age range to have a social safety net. But that was from the response that they had to do because of all of these people just passing away in their homes. And, Korea has also been in the news for being a country that has a birth decline. And countries like Canada too, where I live, is also one of those countries as well. And so it's only going to get worse from here if nothing changes. And these policies need to be pushed as a response to public health, right? Just in the same way that I think it was a Surgeon General. I didn't even know they did that over there. But he said this in 2017, that this is a public health crisis. People isolating themselves and not being able to be around people and not having the ability to reach out or have any safety nets can lead to people not reaching out for help. Ergo, having a slow, painful, and lonely death. And Korea is just a very extreme case of this, but I would not be shocked if this was something that was happening in other countries as well. And I think another thing too that being lonely might insinuate, at least now in modern times, is the changing dynamics between men and women, right? Back in the day, having to be the breadwinner used to be an only male problem, right? Most families are trying to get rid of their girls because it's an extra mouth to feed and she can't work. And if I get rid of her and she gets married, I get a little ka-ching, And now, fast forward to where we are now, it is both, men and women who populate the workforce. And one of the things that kind of shifts male and female dynamics is the concept of, men and women not always seeing eye to eye because the playing field has been leveled. Listen, I am a breakup advocate. Shout out to people who want to break up with them right now. Do it right now. You don't need to fit into a mold that doesn't suit you, right? And I think one thing, and part of the reason why the manosphere has just exploded, is mainly because it's a logical response to how men and women have been taught to think about themselves and how the world really is. A lot of these men have this concept of women being these beings that are withholding sex from them, that are being grossly, sexual, or who aren't being chaste and who aren't being feminine, when in reality, women and men, most of their problems are very similar at this point. And so it's hard if you don't actually take a time to critically think about, okay, this is who I am and this is who they are, and let's just see how we fit together, instead of prescribing something before you ever met someone just because of your perception of gender. It's another thing, and I feel like a lot of people, when they think about loneliness, there's some people who think, I'm lonely, but I have my girlfriend, or I have my wife, or I have my husband. You can be lonely and be in a relationship. You can definitely, that can be happening to you. And some people think that singleness is part of that equation of the loneliness epidemic, people not wanting to be married or have kids or settle down early. But guys, we need to think bigger. We need to think bigger. We need to think about these governments and these people in high places who don't want to give us a livable wage. You know what I mean? How you supposed to go to the bar and meet a girl and you can't even afford a fucking beer, bitch? How? How are you supposed to be a high value man, but you're getting wage thefted to the max by the man? You know what I mean? So there's so many layers around this concept of loneliness that I hope more of us start to uncover and start to really question, because it's getting worse. And if we let them run us to the ground, they're going to run us to the ground. And what are we going to say? We did nothing. So Sandra, what's the antidote? What's the solution? I don't have one. But I will say that one thing that can help you right now is finding a community. Find other people who are looking for friends. It's not going to be cool. You're not going to feel cool trying to make friends, especially if you're an adult. Being cool as a kid, no kid is cool. You know what I mean? And if you think a kid is cool, they're not cool. So it's less of a problem to find friends as a child, because that's what you're supposed to do. But as you're an adult, you have responsibilities, you have bills. It can seem like kind of out of your way, but it'll only be a benefit to find people who you can feel in communion with. And that can be anything. It doesn't matter. Don't let them try to tell you how to make friends. It's up to you. It can look like anything. It can be from church all the way to punk, metal, rock shows. It don't matter. Finding other human beings, being around other human beings, being in social contact with people is so crucial to human survival. And I think surviving is the minimum. If you find a tribe, try your best and put yourself out there and stick out and go out on a limb. I don't think anything that's been worth having in this life has been something that was totally easy. You could just speed run and just get everything you want. You'll never really find true satisfaction that way. And I can say that with confidence, because there have been many times that I've done things that I was really scared to do or really unsure about, and it only benefited me. It might even feel like gambling. Hey, if you have to frame it that way to make it feel good, do that. Don't gamble though. Gambling is bad. I'm not endorsing gambling. But going out of your way to make friends and meet people is so crucial, and it can teach you so much about yourself and how you are as a person. You can encounter things that you never even knew you had inside of yourself. It's such a beautiful thing. Growth is such a beautiful thing, and you can really grow as a person if you find community that speaks to you from your heart. It has to be from the stomach. It can't just be something that you think that'll push you forward. Don't be too cerebral about it. Don't even think too much, low-key. Think a little, but don't think too much, because staying in the same place and wanting a different result is insanity. So for all of you lonely losers out there, I'm just joking, but for all of you people who feel alone, you're not alone. That's one thing that's cool about feeling lonely, is that you're not alone in that. I think that's one of the things that we never, like, we take that for granted. We always think that we're lonely islands. We are not. We're all very similar to each other. And I think that can really be a point of connection, And you can be like, hey, I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing. The other person will probably agree with you. This has been Move the Bowl, please. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like. Be sure to leave a comment. And let me know what your antidote for loneliness has been. For me personally, it's been planning and making thoughts for the future. That has been one of the things that I've been doing. Also, I've been really for some reason getting back into anime. I had a time where I just couldn't watch it for some reason, but I'm doing that now and it kind of helps me. I feel like the characters and I are getting along and shit. I just recently started Inuyasha and it's really good. I like it. I like the sub though. The dub is anyway. So yes, leave a comment, subscribe, and I will see you beautiful people next time.